Do you love records? Well, then join Radio Bristol April 11th for the Radio Bristol Record Expo here at the birthplace of Country Music Museum. The expo is free and open to the public and will feature a plethora of record vendors, country music panels, live music, a food truck, and more. The expo takes place 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday, April 11th, and is a benefit in support of Radio Bristol. Join us for the Radio Bristol Record Expo. Broadcasting from the birthplace of country music, this is WBCM LP Bristol.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. We're so glad that you're out here with us tonight. My name is Renee Rogers, and I am the museum director here at the museum. And we're really glad to have you here. And if anyone who's on YouTube, we're glad to welcome you too. My colleague Josh Littleton is at the back taking care of all the behind-the-scenes things, which I'm very grateful for. And we are very excited to be hosting Dr. Malcolm Smith with us tonight. He will be talking to us about the Clawhammer Banjo Masters of Southwest Virginia project and website, something I have heard on and off about this over the last year or so, and just waiting with bated breath to see what the results were. So we're very pleased to have him with us. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping details. If you do need to use the restroom, they are just down this hallway to the left. In about 15 minutes, the front of the museum will be locked. So if you do need to leave early, please go out the door that is right here beside the Performance Theater. It feels like it's not going to let you out. You just have to really give it a shove. And there will be a Q&A afterwards, so a chance for you to ask Malcolm more questions and get your thoughts shared with him. And if you are joining us via YouTube, you can put your questions in the comments section. We will be sending a survey out afterwards, and we really value your feedback, so keep an eye out for that. And then please consider sharing a donation after tonight's program. For those of you who are online with us, you can go to our website, and there is a place to do donations there. But if you're here with us, we have a jar over there, or a glass jar over there, and the museum offers free and low-cost programming, and so that really helps us to keep it accessible and be doing cool things like this. Before we get into the program, though, let me introduce Malcolm to you. Dr. Malcolm Smith is a writer, storyteller, musician, and folklorist who has been studying the music of the mountains for years. His biography of famed fiddler Albert Hash is in its third printing with McFarland Press, and the project that is tonight's focus was just released on the internet. His latest book, It's Always Been About the Party, Appalachian Music in the Blue Ridge, is scheduled to be published later this year, and I would say there's a good chance you will be able to find it in the museum store soon after. Malcolm is an avid clawhammer player and a recovering college professor. He makes his home in the mountains of Carroll County, Virginia. So please join me in welcoming Malcolm Smith.
Hey, good evening. Don't do that. I've been to these museum lectures before, and a lot of times they just suck. And so I promise two things. One is it won't be academic, and it won't suck tonight, okay? No, not this museum, yeah. Every other museum it has been. Well, I just want to start by saying a couple of things. This has been, this last year, the most exciting project of my life. It came out, why have a map of Southwest Virginia clawhammer players? I was asking myself that a lot this year because I wrote 55 biographies of obscure banjo players from Southwest Virginia, and my friends would not come over to my house. They wouldn't make eye contact with me because that's all I could talk about, was the lives of these characters. And I'm full of stories tonight, so that's really what I hope you came for, to hear some of the stories and some of the music from these players. There were two people who were invaluable to this project. There were many, hundreds, maybe thousands, but I just want to show this motley crew here. This is, he was going to come tonight and got called into work at the last minute, but this is Jason Phillips. He's a great fiddler from Carroll County, Virginia, and also happens to be a dust-up web designer. And he designed the web pages for us. And his full-time job is to design maps for the CDC. So I think he did pretty well. And this character here, we would have none of this without, and that's Mac Trainum. For those of you who love clawhammer music and don't know about Mac, don't take anything else away from here tonight except to go and find Mac's music and listen to Mac and find out about him. He's also one of the premier banjo builders in the world. This banjo right here, and I guess that's the only one that I brought tonight that Mac built, but Mac builds incredible open back banjos in the style that's preferred in Carroll County. And he has, I think, is working on his 800th banjo now. His daughter Hannah plays number one, and I just got to hear her play it the other night, and it sounded so good. So Mac Trainum, take that away. And he is one of our clawhammer masters, so you can find him on the map. What we did is just create a map. I'll go to the home page here just so you can kind of see what we're all about. And then tonight, hopefully, when you go home, you can play with this. There's our map, interactive map. There are 55 banjo players from, and you'll notice we're still building. There are a few you can see. You didn't know. We're going to find out that one of our great banjo players was better known as a guitar player. And we're going to find out about a lot of these characters tonight. Before I start, though, I want to, anytime you talk about clawhammer banjo in the state of Virginia, you have to start with this premise. There is a hidden history of banjo playing in our state that is buried. And we attempted, kind of, to get at that history, but it's so buried. And that is the origination of clawhammer banjo in the state, which came to us from African Americans, came to us from slaves, came to us from free men and women who brought this instrument over from Africa. This is a replication, a very good one, of a gourd banjo built by Dana Jennings here in the States. She is a master builder of these and quite a player. But this is really the banjo that first came to Southwest Virginia, the gourd banjo. And it came with the people who, most of who came through Jamaica up this way as slaves. And they did everything they could to hide their gourds or to grow their gourds once they got to a stable place. And in Jamaica is where we know the fifth string was added to what had been an African instrument. There's a variety of instruments, stringed instruments, some still being played in Africa that had 4 strings, 3 strings, 2 strings. But the fifth string was definitely added in Jamaica. We know that, and then brought to the United States. And so anyone who tells you that some guy that rode in the Civil War added the fifth string is full of baloney. The origination of the fifth string, we know for certain, happened in Jamaica. And as the banjo came here, you can see how inventive people were, mostly blacks, and they spread it through their work on the railroad, the timber service in this part of the state, river work over on the New River, and railroads. It traveled all through this area of the state. The second derivation, as white people began to take up the banjo and learn it, and some blacks, they found a very practical thing, which was this banjo I made with my friend Billy Cornett, who's a master builder. And we made these out of sawing a grain measure in half. So this, in the old days, you'd go to a store, and say, I need so much flour. And they had or so much corn to bottle whatever you're going to bottle with the corn. And they would put it in a hoop like this to measure it. And these grain measures made great banjos. And they already had some ornamentation. You can see this one has a nice metal hoop on it. And they were tack head. This is a goat skin on this one. And so skins and wood became, in Virginia, became the first banjos, really, that we had to play. Pioneers having lots of, the white pioneers having lots of wood on their land began to experiment with it, with smaller pots and building banjos that look like this. You'll see a lot of these still around. Of course, there are a couple of really famous makers in North Carolina of these. This one is a more recent banjo, but this model became adopted by a lot of families. And so you're seeing the evolution here as it moved from being primarily an African-American instrument into the industrial age. And then we jump clear up until the 1960s, and this is a copy of a Kyle Creed banjo. Kyle was a maker who lived in Galax, probably one of the most famous makers in the world. His innovation was to take things like linoleum and countertop material and make it so you could slide really easy on it. And these became the standard. This one was built for me by Dewey Cole, who may not make it through the month in Carroll County, but he is the son of Calvin Cole, who is one of our banjo masters from Fancy Gap. And he built it in Kyle's style. And you see how easy you could just slide on that material up and down to get some wild sounds. And then last of all, this is a modern banjo. Kind of incorporates all the ideas here. We're going back to skin heads, you know, the goat skin head. It does have frets, but it also has some reminders that we were fretless for many years. Frets came in as the banjo molded with the fiddle, and then later, 1920s, the guitar entered the scene in Virginia. But the quintessential Virginia music, both black and white, was fiddle and banjo, the two instruments together. And that's why I think our topic tonight is so important to our state, to our region, to imagine that there are 55 living and passed away people just in our small area of the planet who reached master status. And we had some criterion, of course, when we started deciding who was going to go on the map and you know, where they were going to be. The criterion first was that they had made a significant difference in the playing. Either their style was unique, they were outstanding teachers and influenced a lot of people, and that they were accessible. There were many banjo players who lived in nooks and crannies and hollers that we'll never hear of. And that's a sad fact. But we've begun to uncover some of those folks, and you'll find many of them. I'll talk about a couple tonight. You'll find many of them sprinkled throughout the map. Couple of notes before we start into stories and ideas. Women were absolutely essential to this process, both in playing the banjo, teaching the banjo, and in making banjos. And we found that most of the great masters in Southwest Virginia had been influenced in one way or another by their mother. Families is where this instrument grew and spread. Okay, back to the hidden history. There were, at some point, it is estimated, more than 2,000 black banjo players in the counties of Southwest Virginia. All but maybe 10 or 15 of those have been lost to history. Why? For a variety of reasons, but part of it was just that they were not appreciated. They were learned from, their music and their instruments were copied, and they were powerful players, many of them. The first style that came out of Africa, we refer to now as a stroke style, which is very close to the clawhammer banjo. It sounds more like, though, what we consider, quote-unquote, minstrel banjo. But there were a few people who really got that and kept it going, and still there are people who play in that very profound style. Let me just show you an example of one of our masters. This is something we uncovered in the work of this, and I'm really proud. I owe one of our banjo masters who lives way over in Giles County, up in here. I'm going to have to put my glasses on for this. In Giles County, there is a master by the name of Chris Villa. And Chris's goal in life right now is to recreate, he's a fiddler and a banjo master, and his goal is to recreate the music of Henry Reed. He grew up right next door to the Reed family over in Glen Lynn and the Narrows, Virginia, and he has dedicated his life to playing all of Henry's music and associated people. One of the banjo players that played with the famous Henry Reed, who was quote unquote discovered, by Alan Jabor, the great folklorist who came and found Henry's music and just became smitten with it. One of the people who played with him was Homer Walker. And this is a picture of Homer. I'll pull it up here so you can kind of see him. This is how the map works. You click on the biography and there'll be a sound sample there. Instead of a sound sample, what I'd like to play for you is something that we discovered in the course of this research through our friend Chris Villa, who had found some documents that were developed in the 1970s, and they had been put together, this footage, in a film called The Life, it was called Banjo Man, The Life and Music of Uncle Homer Walker. They called him Uncle. They call me Uncle now in Carroll County. And in Carroll County, I think like Giles County, it is the highest level that one can possibly reach to be called an uncle. And here's just a minute of Uncle Homer Walker.
Cat got out of bandbox and ended up on a good warm table. Feeling fine, boys.
Narrated by Taj Mahal.
Walker has lived in Giles County near Narrows, Virginia for most of his 78 years. His family has lived in Western Virginia for generations, having settled in this area some 150 years ago along the New River. He is the last surviving member of a family of 9 and is known affectionately to one and all as Uncle Homer. The banjo is an ancient instrument, part of the African legacy to the New World. Up until around the turn of the century, it was the most popular instrument of the black musician in America. Uncle Homer is one of the very few who remain the masters of this old-time strumming technique, a style known as clawhammer.
Well, I just mostly picked it up myself. Didn't nobody tell me and learn me how. I just picked it up and started off fooling with it just so I could play a piece to it, and then it kept following up there. I get a little better and a little better. And so didn't nobody exactly teach me to play a banjo. I just picked it up by myself. Mother played the banjo, grandfather played the banjo, my uncle played the banjo, and I had 2 sisters that played banjos. A lot of my foreparents on both sides of the family that was musicians and played banjos. Now my Uncle Teal played a banjo. And that was why I told you about the old homemade banjo that he made himself to try to learn to play on. Made it out of, I think he'd taken a piece of white oak and trimmed it down, make it thin so he could bend it, around in a hook shape. And made him a banjo and put a groundhog hide on it for a banjo. Now we sat there and I practiced and played and plucked and fooled with that old banjo many times. When he didn't have it himself plucking and fooling with it, I had it. And that's where I learned to play a few pieces on the banjo. I started trying to play, and looked to me like sometimes it sounded like a bunch of cats are fighting when I got started out and making so much racket, and then maybe the old folks running plumb out the house, then we got out and making all that racket. I had to get out and make it out on a stump somewhere outside the house and play. Now, I kept practicing though till I learned to play a little, and got up to where I'm at now. Of course, you can't play yet. I'm just practicing. Feel away, feel away. Home, you see the children steal away, and I ain't got long to stay here. For when I was in the house of sin, I ain't got long to stay here. Oh, Satan went out when Christ come in, and I ain't got long to stay here. My Lord, he done. This old fella me was one of my great uncles, I reckon, from what I've been told. And he'd steal away, and go to wood to pray. Now, Master didn't allow him to pray. He didn't have time for that. He had to be working. And so he'd steal off and go to the woods. Had an old lady there, the cook, a colored lady. She was a cook at the house. And everything that went on, and she seen going on, she had to go tell her master to get some of them whipped. She come in and told the master that they'd gone up on the mountain to pray. But never mind till I take my whip up, I'll bring him out of there. When he got up there, though, Abe done got things warmed up so well with the Lord, throwed his whip away. And he come back out of the mountain singing Steal Away 7, shouting. Now steal away, steal away, steal away home to Jesus, children, steal away, steal away. And I ain't got long to stay here. But he called me by the thunder. I ain't got long to stay here. And comfort sound in my soul. And I ain't got long to stay here. Now steal away. Steal away. Steal away home to Jesus, children. Steal away. Steal away. And I ain't got long.
You get the idea. We'll pause Homer there, and there will be a link up tomorrow on Homer's page on our website to both. There's 2 parts to that video, and I'd love for you to go there and watch that whole video. It's one of the most incredible things that I discovered in this work, because we have lost much of this history. Homer's pattern as a banjo player and a musician followed what we found to be true of almost all of these banjo players, particularly ones who, quote unquote, were professional, whatever that meant in their geography, in their context. But they played real hard when they were young. They learned the instrument at an early age. In their 20s and 30s, they were out playing everywhere and playing parties. Homer was famous for dance parties over on the New River. And a lot of times, banjo was the only instrument they needed to have a whole barn dance. And in fact, one of our masters, Dent Wimmer from up in Floyd County, said that he would go with his good friend, a fiddler, to a party, and the fiddler would go in the living room where they had rolled up all the rugs, and he'd play for the old folks to dance, and the banjo player, who was Dent, who was wilder and a little more wicked, would go out in the yard with all the teenagers, and he'd play for a dance out there. And all they needed was a banjo man to have a great dance. But this history needs to be explored, and one of the great things, many of you know or have heard of the great black musician Rihanna Giddens, and she is working on a project which will dive much more into this, particularly focusing on North Carolina black banjo players. But I wanted to make that note before we dug into this, that much it wasn't an appropriated skill. It just flowed out of meetings with black musicians. People became enamored with the sound of the banjo, learned how to make their own, and that's one of the great things about the banjo in American history, is it's always been a homemade instrument, something that you could make. I should, for just a minute, mention that clawhammer is a very different style. You don't find it in the current, like bluegrass and that sort of thing. The difference, if someone wanted to ask you, is what is clawhammer playing? It's all about down. Just remember that. The clawhammer, every note is played down. So, and it involves the thumb in what looks like a clawhammer. But they called it a number of things: banging, knocking, sawing, just on and on. There were all sorts of names for it. But finally, I think folklorists, and mostly white, settled on clawhammer as the name for it. So that's the name that we've adopted today. How did the spread to white people happen? Well, we've traced it back to one fellow, really, in Southwest Virginia. I mean, as I was working on this, I reread something that Mike Seeger, the great musician and folklorist, said. He believed that all American music came from one true vine. He said, and as the further I dug into Southwest Virginia banjo players, we find that there were a few influential people who seemed to, just like luthiers and other artisans in our state, who seemed to be the catalyst for so much of this. And I would say that if you want to look at current clawhammer banjo playing in Virginia, it all streams back to one person who came to Galax before the Civil War. He settled in Carroll County, right outside of Galax, and in about 1850, he had grown up. Look at me, I can't operate heavy equipment tonight. This fellow grew up in North Carolina, and then traveled to Galax with his sister, and they settled there in 1850. He was 20 years of age, and what a name, Manly Reese. That was his name. And you see that banjo he's got, that's an actual picture of Manly, the only one we could find. Of course, there were no recording devices at that time that were reliable and that lasted. But Manly was reputed to have been a fantastic banjo player. You'll notice this banjo he built, again, has no frets, but it's moving in to the bigger round pot. Made specifically for a banjo. So he didn't appropriate a grain measure for that one. He actually bent the wood to make it. His father was a banjo player, and the two of them learned from slaves on their North Carolina farm in the Piedmont. He brought his sister, and they came to Galax at 20 years and 22 years of age. And Manly sought out the best fiddler in town. And he found him down in the railroad yard playing with blacks, he reported. The fiddler's name was Greenberry Leonard. Don't you love that name? And Greenberry was an incredible fiddler by all accounts. Of course, we have no recordings of him, but we do have recordings of several of his students who on up into Civil War and beyond Civil War times were incredible musicians. And he and Greenberry began to play for dances in Galax and started a Southwest Virginia tradition. It had already been going on, as I said. This was nothing new, but it had been limited to the railroad yards, the homes of African Americans, and the places where black players worked. And he was a bridge between that black music and sharing this with wealthy white people in Galax and with working people in Galax. Manly stayed there for 10 years. And I mean, these are the kind of stories that I had to collect. I'm sorry to lay this one on you, but not all banjo players came to a good ending. Manly in 1860 was recruited by the Confederate Army. And unfortunately, he and a group of young men from Galax, about 20 of them, were on their way to Richmond where they were going to be trained. And on the way to Richmond, it was a beautiful day, beautiful spring day, reportedly. All these young men in their 20s to 25 years of age, 20 of them, took off their shirts and climbed up on top of the railroad car they were riding in. They were just put in a boxcar. You know, the Southern Army had no money and no system of transportation. And so these guys all just were lounging on top of a boxcar when about 30 miles outside of Richmond, they came to an unmarked bridge, and it decapitated 18 of the men, and Manley was one of them. The reason that Banjo endured in Galax is he had taught his sister every note he knew and left his banjo with her. And that's how Galax became what it is today, the force that it is today in old time and Appalachian music. Later, one of her sons, Kaylee Brewer, would go on to become a member of the Hillbillies, one of the great recording artists of the right after the Bristol recording session, and traveled the world playing the fiddle and the banjo. And he learned from his mom, who learned from her brother. And it just all begins, to form together. Are you guys doing okay? Is this okay? I've got much more to talk about. I thought before we dive into some of the unknown and obscure people that are on the map, one of the things that I noticed is there were several banjo players who played in the Bristol sessions right here in Bristol, and were recorded during the Bristol sessions. One of them really kind of surprised me. I mean, it was no surprise that she played in the Bristol sessions, but it surprised me that she was a masterful clawhammer player. And when we began to dig into the recordings that Mother Maybelle Carter made, it is unbelievable. Her style and her ability. The thing we know about Maybelle is that her mother and father gave her a banjo at the age of 5, and her dad had built it. And this is not it. This is a more professional banjo that she got later. But she began playing the banjo as her primary instrument. And then when she started to become more serious about her music, not just a hobby, but something she thought might carry her forward, and meeting her future husband, A.P. Carter, Maybelle decided to see if she could play the guitar. And it is an argument that I'm going to make that her incredible guitar style grew out of her bump ditty on the banjo, that the Carter scratch was actually a derivation of clawhammer playing. It's certainly not clawhammer guitar. There are people who are accomplished in that. Molly Tuttle, the great musician and flat picker, can play clawhammer guitar, but the scratch has the elements of clawhammer banjo in it. And if you listen to Maybelle play the banjo, I think that you can see the beginnings of her incredible guitar style in it. If I can get this to pull up here. Not sure what's going on with my technology here. There we go. Let's see if we can play a minute of Maybelle playing her. It may be just me, but I think you can hear the beginnings of the guitar Carter scratch coming through in Maybelle's playing. She was an extraordinary musician. We certainly know that. But she was also a great teacher, and she made sure that every one of her daughters knew how to play clawhammer banjo. And that carried some of them very, very far. Another person, and you've heard of this, I know, if you follow old time or even country music at all, you've heard of this great player or the great family that this player came from. Here, I've locked myself out of my own computer. You've heard of this family, I know, the Stoneman family. And they were a Galax family, a very, very extended family, who were all talented musically. But Pop Stoneman, who became, played in the Bristol sessions, as you know, and then went on to form and develop the Stoneman family. Ronnie Stoneman just having passed away here recently, who played with Pop for so many years. The Stoneman family actually started out as a small Galax family band who played, as this music is played best, on their porch in Woodlawn, Virginia, right in between Galax and Hillsville. And we have discovered along the road some incredible pictures of them who were young. The older cousin of Pop did not have good home life. And he moved in with his cousin George. And George really nurtured both his musical talent, but also took care of his cousin and helped raise Pop. The two of them became very familiar with clawhammer banjo and really, really seemed to enjoy playing together. And then something happened. One of the stories in this whole episode of clawhammer development in Southwest Virginia is that it has to do with Henry Witter. Now, many of you know who Grayson and Witter were. They were from this area. Grayson was a mill worker at Freeze Mill. And Henry Witter was a worker there, and Grayson had been a full-time musician. Well, when Witter got pretty good at singing and writing songs and playing the fiddle, and he found this full-time musician to travel with him. They traveled up and down the hills between here and Marion and all over this area, and established themselves as great musicians, but never made any money until Henry Witter went to visit in New York City, was quote-unquote discovered by Ralph Peer. This was before the recording sessions that happened here in Bristol, and made a whole bunch of money off the records that he made. But no one, especially Henry, thought those recordings were that good, and they weren't. But they got better as time went on, and they became really the first great country duo, Grayson Witter. Well, people in Freeze particularly, and Galax and Hillsville and all that area of Carroll County, they saw him go do that, make a bunch of money, making more than they could make in the mill in a year on one recording. And they thought, whoa, I'm that good. And so it started a whole group of people, including Pop Stoneman, who believed as a young man that he was much better than Witter and could. So he took George and a group of his relatives up to New York. They recorded 2 sides with Ralph Beer, and those fell pretty much flat. And none of the Stonemans were happy with the recordings. And George, he got kind of soured on the whole deal. Now, remember, he had taught Pop how to play. He was the family musicologist. He was a family teacher. And he was really the founder of what we now call the Galax Gallop. If you ever go to the festival at Galax, you'll hear a number of people who just seem to gallop away 90 miles an hour on the banjo, and it's all about rhythm. It's a beautiful sight. It's a beautiful sound. And this man was really the founder of that. And what he was playing, and this is where it all ties back together, is stroke-style banjo. He was playing black banjo for the crowds at Galax. Well, Pop decided they could never make money in Galax and took part of the family and headed off to Washington, D.C. And George said, no, I don't want any part of that. I love my banjo playing. I'm going to stay right here, and I'm going to play it the mountain way. And he did the rest of his life. He never made any money playing banjo. He never got great fame and fortune like the rest of the family did. Nashville never knew who he was. But he was George Stoneman, and he taught hundreds of young people how to play the banjo. And I want you to hear just a minute of George playing Sally Ann. I want to know if I'm a human. Well, you know how these things work. I guess I'm supposed to pick out the bags here. We'll do that. Bear with me. I'm bagging it. Okay, confirm. Incorrect. Oh, no. Oh, man. Okay, we got to do it again. Choose all the bags. All right, I'm going to be a bag by the time this is over. All right, here we go. Confirm the bags. All right, success. You see the problem we had trying to. Some of these recordings are owned by universities or owned by private collections, like the Alan Lomax collection. And so we have to deal with their firewalls. Listen to this, though. I love this. Sally Ann. Listen for that Galax Gallop. Hear George's foot in the background. He just can't keep it still. You get the idea. If you go to Galax this year, you'll hear at least 30 or 40 Clawhammer players play in exactly that style. Probably the best one is from right there in Galax, who studied George Stoneman, and her name is Trish Four. She's one of our masters, and she's only in her early 40s. But she's won every contest in the area and in the country. I want to show, and George played with Pop Stoneman with a group called the Jug Drinkers, who was made up of Stoneman family members on the Bristol recordings. And he was also asked by the family from Meadows of Dan, the Sheelers, to play some banjo on their recordings there too. So George was one of the most indispensable musicians that Pierre called upon during the recordings that happened down the street here. I want to take you to my home in Carroll County. Laurel Fork is where I live, and it's I don't know if I can find it on the map. I'll go this way just for time, but I want to show you Carroll County has had more Clawhammer masters than anywhere else. Why that is, we're not sure. But there were and continue to be some great masters. There's Trish Four there. And that guy we included, I'll tell you if we have time about him, but he lived in Richmond, but he had such an impact. This blind musician named Harold Hassenflock had such an impact on Southwest Virginia clawhammer playing that we had to include him. At least 20 of our masters referenced him. These are the more current masters. Referenced him as someone that they depended heavily on. I'm trying to find Mr. Nestor here. He's probably under N, don't you think? Press Nestor is a good story, and he is also an incredible master. He traveled there with another Laurel Fork musician, Uncle Norm Edmonds. Uncle Norm Edmonds was a fiddler who lived right off of Highway 58, and Mr. Nestor, was the switchboard operator in Hillsville. And when he would get off work 3 nights a week, he would walk 11 miles up the mountain to Laurel Fork to play in the little log cabin that Uncle Norm had built, that his kids had built him outside of his house, that was his music room. And Press and Uncle Norm would stay up sometimes all night playing music in there. Uncle Norm and 5 of his sons were all great musicians. And the 2 of them got asked, because they had played in a furniture store in Hillsville, and several people had heard them, they got asked to come to record for Mr. Pierre. Now that was a challenge for Press. Notice we don't have a picture of Press. Do you know why? He did not believe in the photographic camera. He did not think his image should ever be taken. That he thought that would cause him severe trauma and problems in the spiritual world. And he also didn't believe in the combustion engine. And he walked or rode horses everywhere he went. So getting him down to Bristol to record took Uncle Norm weeks of begging and pushing. And finally they blindfolded him and put him in the back of Uncle Norm's truck with a bunch of other wood and a couple of goats, and they went down to Bristol. The crossing, I guess, on the New River was really, really hard down around Mouth Wilson and that area. They had to cross the river 3 times to get to Bristol, and he was just fit to be tied when they got down here. And he told Uncle Norm he would never, ever travel again. Well, they came down and recorded 4 great sides. I'll just play you one of them. This is Press not only playing but singing, with Uncle Norm playing the fiddle in the background. Listen to the power of this banjo player.
May get drunk, may get boozy, okay, gonna be black out today. Walk around in the black car, Julie.
You get the idea. Incredible musician. They recorded 4 sides. Only 2 of them made it to New York City. They said that 2 of them got lost on the train. And in Uncle Norm's house, just down the road from me, he had appointed one of his sons to be the recorder of his legacy, Uncle Norm had, and that's why we have such great, those of you who follow fiddling know that Uncle Norm is one of the most copied old-time fiddlers of all. And that's because his oldest son spent a lot of his time recording out there when they played. He didn't play an instrument, so it was his job to record the family. Well, in about 1965, his house burnt down. He died in the fire. It was a suicide. And we lost all of those recordings. So we only have 2 recordings of Press Nestor. Now, a third problem. These are the kind of things banjo players get into. The third problem is they spelled his damn name wrong on the release. Pierre didn't bother to notice that his name was N-E-S-T-E-R. And they put it on the record as N-E-S-T-O-R. Now, as I was working on this project, and a little bit before, I went to visit the store there in Laurel Fork that is owned by the Nestor family. And when I brought up Press Nestor, I got an earful. And it turns out, I mean, this is the story, and these are the kind of rabbit holes I've been going down for a year. It turns out shortly after the turn of the century, a preacher, a fire and brimstone preacher, came through Carroll County, and he gave a sermon at Laurel Fork, a tent revival that was attended by everybody in the county. And when he got there, he noticed that about a quarter of the county and all of the people there in Laurel Fork were named Nestor, and that most of them were related. And he looked at that name and thought about it, and this was his sermon. If your name is Nestor, that is of the devil. You know, because Nestor, you know what that implies, that you're just at home making babies. That's all you're doing, you know. And he gave one of those speeches, and he said, I would encourage all of you right now to stand up and change your name to Nestor. Well, about 20 people in the area did, and they were immediately run out of the county to West Virginia. Now, if you go over to Bluefield, West Virginia, you'll see a whole communities of Nestor, but there are no ERs in Carroll County. And so that was a double insult to have your name spelled as OR on one of the most prolific recordings traveling the country. And for many years, the museum didn't know that until we got some great people to research. I found his grave. It's only about 4 miles from my house, and it is definitely ER, J.P. Press Nestor, and I think he'd be proud that we fixed it for him. And now every publication that this entity puts out spells it right, and he will live on, but we keep hoping that under some rock, some of Press's recordings will turn up, because the 2 that we have are so precious. And if you haven't heard them, immediately go to the site and listen to some of Press's work. I'm going to cover about 2 more, and then we'll take some questions, if that sounds good. I hope you're all still here, so I assume this is okay for you. One of my favorite people in this whole list came from Meadows of Dan, Virginia, just up the road from me, about 8 miles from where I live, and they were the Sheeler family, the Sheeler and Blackard's family. This was Joe Blackard was the head of this family. And Joe Blackard grew up in Meadows of Dan. He was a school teacher and a mailman, both. So he worked all the time, but he was also a great musician. He played a number of instruments, but his favorite instrument was the banjo. And if you have heard of Sammy Sheeler, he's one of the direct descendants of him. Sammy is probably the greatest, right now, the greatest bluegrass player alive. But Sammy, like many banjo players who play in the bluegrass realm, started out learning as a clawhammer family player. In fact, Sammy remembers going to the Black Fodrell family in Stewart, Virginia, and getting his first clawhammer lesson from this ancient black player there, Mr. Fodrell. His sons later became two of the greatest black blues artists ever to come from Virginia, and their country blues recordings are legendary. But their dad was teaching people in the area and taught many of these players that we're talking about had stopped by to see Mr. Fodrell during their time. Anyway, Joe Blackard up in Patrick County in Meadows of Dan grew up working hard and was just a phenomenal musician, also a teacher. He had a young student by the name of Jesse Sheeler, and Jesse took a liking to his daughter, Clarice, and the two of them got married, and thus began the infamous Sheeler family that traveled to the Bristol sessions. The folks around there said that they had never heard such banjo playing as this man. And why can't I find Patrick County? I'm having a harder time than I should because the map's too small. We'll do it another way. Anyway, I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to play with the map in this way as much as I'd like to, since we just really released it. Let's see if I can find Mr. Blackard this way. Oh, I'm still in the... one of the things that I should point out is there are a number of ways to find players. One is the map. One is by the county list. We also have them listed conveniently just by their last name. And here's Joe. They called him Dad or Pop Blackard. And here's we'll just start by listening to Joe sing one of their favorite songs that came from that area, Sandy River Belle. What I love is how these stories continue. The original Sheeler house that Jesse and Clarice, his daughter and son-in-law, moved into was just given to two Sheeler descendants, Dane and Cassidy. The two of them are in their 20s, and Dane is a carpenter and a house builder, and they just restored the whole Sheeler house there in Meadows of Dan. It's a showpiece now, and I get to go over there and play music with them every week. And these two kids in their 20s are carrying on their family tradition because their dad, Clay Sheeler, who lives down in the Raleigh-Durham area, had encouraged and taught all of his kids to carry on the music of the family. And so we have a Sheeler family jam every week, and we only play Sheeler tunes over at the original house. When Dane was refurbishing this house, the music room in the house, and it's a big old 2-story farmhouse, and they had a room just for music, and it was all covered with wainscoting, that beadboard up and down. Listen to this. Dane took that beadboard apart. Now, this was 100 years old, so it just fell into pieces. He labeled each of those strips and redid the ductwork and, the heating and air conditioning, and then put back each strip in its place. And I said, Dane, they sell that stuff over at Lowe's, don't you? He said, Malcolm, I don't want to lose the music in it. Isn't that beautiful? They care so much about their family legacy, and it continues. Sammy Sheeler, that many of you have heard of. So these traditions just continue to carry on. I'm going to end with a contemporary, just one person I have to mention, and then we'll take some questions. I know I always talk longer than I say I will, but that's just par for the course. By the way, for those of you I've spit upon tonight, I apologize. It happens. Those of you who are on the internet, you were safe tonight for my screaming and yelling and carrying on. I'm going to go clear over, and this was a little bit out of our range, but we still decided to go there. I'm going to go clear over to Roanoke. Not really Southwest Virginia. No, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go to Franklin County. That's where I wanted to go. And I can't get away without mentioning this man. He passed away last year in 2025, and I was there at his funeral. I think one of the great legends of clawhammer playing in Virginia, and a true Virginian. If any of you went over the last 20 years to the annual Folklife Festival they have at Ferrum at the university, if you went down way back where they jump horses, down there, you'd see this character right there manning a full-size submarine still, demonstrating how they used to make moonshine whiskey. Because for 60 years, Jimmy played old-time music and made some of Franklin County's finest. He came along right after the big moonshine scare in Franklin County. He was jailed 8 times for making moonshine, but he was the best damn clawhammer player that this state ever produced. And Jimmy learned while he was from his brother, who brought him into both music and distilling, and they learned while they were working with the still. One time, the revenuers caught sight of him. One of my neighbors is Stacy Boyd, his son, and Stacy said at the age of 5, his dad would go off to work in the morning and say, kids, while you're playing here in the yard, if anybody comes down in a car and comes back out and there's less people in the car, you come find me. And so Stacy didn't realize it, but he was a moonshine lookout at the age of 5. And Jimmy shared freely his recipe, his music. He started the band in a garage in the Dry Hill area there of Franklin County, and he had his still nearby for many, many years. It's estimated that he put 4 boys through college on his makings of moonshine. And he would tell you, start a story when you got to his house and end it when you left. He was an incredible man. When he died, they buried him on his own property. And 5 of his sons, all huge individuals in biv overalls, carried him out of the back of a 1942 Ford pickup in the casket and put him in the grave right there. And Richard Bowman, one of our greatest fiddlers in Southwest Virginia, played Jimmy off to heaven, and he went. But Jimmy said that he learned early on that moonshine and music go together because they both make you happy. And he was a poet, a philosopher, and a hell of a banjo player. I'll just give you a taste. This is one of his performances at Galax. It became what they call the Franklin County Romp, his style of banjo playing, and originated with his father, Ted Boyd. And now Jimmy's grandson, who studied with a Folklife grant from the State Folklife program to study with his grandfather. Now Jared Boyd is considered the greatest living banjo player in Southwest Virginia, and he's Jimmy's grandson of 29 years of age. But here's Jimmy Boyd and the Dry Heel Draggers. They got the name Dry Heel Dragger because some neighbor said, "Boy, you guys drag when you play." And so they were from Dry Hill, and it just stuck. We're the Dry Hill Draggers. But listen to them. They do nothing that drags. Here they go. When the Draggers would play, hundreds of dancers would amass, no matter where they were. They were Southwest Virginia's most prolific and greatest dance band. And they still continue today in a band that Jimmy taught all of the members how to play, called the Twin Creeks String Band. So Jimmy's legacy lives on. But you can see his master there, just fast and hard. Five-time winner of Galax Festival. Well, we could go on and on for hours. You could tell my former wife said that I could talk for 3 days straight, and I probably could. But this is a subject that's really dear and wonderful to me to talk about and to share with people. We're getting somewhere between 300 and 500 hits a day on this little bitty website from all over the world. The country outside of America that gives us the greatest number of hits is Japan, interestingly enough, which has a big hunger for clawhammer banjo and is really become the mecca for collecting old banjos too in the world.
I thought it might be Japan that you were going to say. But this has been so fascinating, Malcolm. Thank you so much. And I can hardly wait to dig into the site more. But I would love to take some questions from the audience. If you do want to do a question, wait till I get the mic to you, because we want to be sure the folks on YouTube can hear you.
So I have 2 questions. The first one, why Jamaica in the 5th string?
Jamaica was a landing spot there, and they were looking, many of the musicians who played there were looking for a brighter sound, and the drone strings are used in a lot of African instruments, but up to that point, for some reason, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, there had not been a drone string on the banjo, and somebody got the idea. It really, if you look at the African banjo, it didn't amount to that complicated maneuver to add the fifth string. For years, there was a rumor that Joel Sweeney, and he claimed, who was, a Civil War era banjo white man player, said he had put the fifth string on, but he had simply done it because he'd seen black musicians playing with the fifth string. But we don't know exactly why, but we know that they loved the drone in the lutes and other various instruments that they had played, and so it just made sense. And it changed the instrument forever, made it much more accessible with that drone in the background, and turned it into a drum, a rhythm instrument. And that is so important to the fiddle banjo duet music of Southwest Virginia. We didn't need a guitar, or a bass, because we had the banjo.
Did you use Cecilia Conway at all in your research?
Yes,
Okay.
I did, and I know her, and
Yeah, I figured you did.
she's an incredible researcher. And there's a young woman that has written a book called The Well of Souls that continues her work. She recently came through Floyd, and we were just blown away by her and her husband. They went all over the world researching paintings of banjos, and it really made the Jamaica connection stick. And I would highly recommend that book, The Well of Souls. It's beautifully written too, and it really talks a lot about the culture that developed the banjo. The banjo was, or banjer, or banja, was a sacred instrument to many blacks and Africans. And as it was their instrument, and there were reports as early as 1790 of banjers. Well, Thomas Jefferson saw them, but they were being played in New York City in the 1700s. And so we know the fifth string was here then. But it made its way to Southwest Virginia early on, and then right before the Civil War became the instrument of choice in Southwest Virginia.
And just one other question, in terms of research, like the archives, how have you, like those old films, and where have you gone to find all that stuff?
There were predecessors to, and I can't think, you probably know his last name, Kip. I can't think, he was at Ferrum College, and he put together a body of research of obscure banjo, particularly black and women banjo players, and devoted us, he's still alive, I wish I could remember his last name, but you will see footage that, and he helped with that film and he started, was a very young man, and still continues his research into African American banjo scholars. And he's an incredible man, but he was at Ferrum for many years as the folklorist there. But there's always been an interest in Southwest Virginia because we just had such a plethora of players, and it became a part of every family. A beautiful story, when I said family, is Ralph Stanley. We included Ralph because he was a great clawhammer player, and the reason he was his mother, Lucy. In Dickinson County, Lucy was born into a family of 12 siblings, and every one of them played the banjo. And when Ralph was 5 years old, his mother bought from one of his aunts a banjo and gave it to Ralph and made sure that he learned it. And Ralph, that started Ralph on his career. His brother Carter took more to his father, who was a primitive Baptist gospel singer. And that's where Carter learned some of those tunes that still haunt us all, you know. And this is what we learned, that family, the banjo is a family instrument, that it's best transmitted by family, best played in a family setting, and grows out of incredible families. By the way, just to tell you how hard life was in Dickinson County in the Clinch Mountains, 5 of Sarah's brothers who worked in the mines all committed suicide. That was part of the research that we found. But Lucy Stanley's relatives, she was an incredible player. And every concert, including his last, Ralph closed the concert by playing his mother's favorite Clawhammer tune. And we have recordings on the site of him doing so. No one ever recorded Lucy, unfortunately. But mothers were so important. And there were some incredible women. I didn't even talk about them, like Matoki Slaughter from up in Pulaski. And Matoki did an interesting thing. She broke all the rules because with her downstroke, she would catch 2 strings coming back up. And it created the most complicated, most complex sound you ever heard. And she was never really heard until Alice Gerard, of Hazel and Alice fame, moved to Galax and started a publication called the Old Time Herald. And while she was there, she met Matoki and was just blown away with her. And she traveled with Matoki and her sister for 5 years. In her recent biography, she talks about how important Matoki's music was to her musical knowledge. And when we were giving this presentation in Galax a few weeks ago, Matoki's daughter came, and it just made us so happy. And she told us we had a couple of things wrong, and we fixed it right away.
Christina Gaddy was actually is the author you're talking about for Well of Souls, and we did a speaker sessions with her, so you can go back on the website and see the talk that we had with Christina.
It's worth hearing her.
I've got a question. Just with the examples that you played, there's such a diversity of sound. And I'm wondering if Southwest Virginia, if there's like characteristics to you that really stand out that make players Southwest Virginia players, or if it's really county to county, or if it's even smaller than that.
Smaller than that. I think, this is my personal opinion, Chris, but just in Galax, the city alone, you could find 18 different distinct clawhammer styles. And it depended on individualism, also who they learned from, where they were originally from. And it also depended a lot on the fiddler they were playing with. Because clawhammer, unlike bluegrass banjo, which is a solo artist, the goal of the clawhammer player is to drive the dancers by emulating the fiddle as best as they can and accenting the beats that the fiddler needs in order to play. And so, but what the theory is that there's a common stash of tunes that everybody played. You know, so you could go, and you can still do this. I could go anywhere in any of these counties in Southwest Virginia and pull out a certain tune, and you could back then, but everybody had their own take on it, you know. But that's what makes music wonderful, and that's what makes jam sessions so rich. You hear the same song being played but in all these idiosyncratic ways, and somehow they all fit together, you know. And so one of the theories that folklorists have is that there's a stable of tunes that are shared, and when we come together, we can play those. And then there are the individual tunes that get really interesting and weird and beautiful. And I think that's true in any form of music, too.
And then also looking at the map, it strikes me that this area specifically, like Sullivan County, there's not too many dots. And I'm wondering, like, is there a reason for that there haven't been significant banjo players in
part of it was access to black players and where they settled and where they, in fact, one of the things that this has sparked is I think it'd be really interesting to draw a map of where slaves were offed and sold, and look at the travel and the migration of the banjo throughout Virginia. But you really didn't find that many players all together anywhere else in the state. Richmond, for example, there were a few, and there still are a few. And one of the people we celebrate, Harold Hausenflock, was a blind man from Richmond, but his dad purposely brought him to the mountains to hear clawhammer banjo because he thought that Harold could learn it. And man, he did. He became one of the greatest players of all time. And he influenced just in my neck of the woods. He lived in Richmond, but he came down, he lived with who were the Roan Mountain Hilltoppers. He influenced their playing and lived with them. They took him in for a while. He lived with Abe Horton and Laura Fork and learned Abe's unique style of banjo note for note. He taught Trish Four and Mac Trainum and on their styles. And he developed a teaching method by cassette that traveled all over the world. People were sending tapes to Harold asking him to critique them, and he was the hardest critiquer. Trish Ford told me that, and I about fell over. How could you possibly send Harold a tape? Because he'd just tell you that sounds like crap. Don't play that. He was very matter of fact and very opinionated. But he knew his stuff. And there's just a side to Harold that I know you'll appreciate, Chris. He was always in search of what he called the mountain whum, W-H-U-M. And it was a certain sound that some banjo players had and others didn't. Now, he thought that a couple of players in our area, in our region, had it. He thought Mac Trainum had it and still has it. But he didn't think, some of our greatest players had it. He heard all of them, and he was very critical. But the whum is a certain resonance that a banjo player can get, and in Harold's mind, it just exalted them to deity.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, Malcolm, this has been delightful. Thank you so much. I know that everyone will definitely be digging into this website more, and I know certainly we will. You've mentioned loads of people that I want to learn more about.
There are cards over and some stickers over on the table. If you play banjo, grab a couple of stickers for your cases and tell your friends about our website. I meant to mention that this was paid for through a grant from the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, who I think have really been pretty happy with what we did, and I never thought it was going to be this much work. But it turned out to be a great thing. And you cannot, this is my new motto, you cannot have the folk without the Lord. And this project grew out of the fact that we were talking, a group of us musicians were talking one night, that so many young people, our jams program, are producing these incredible monsters of music, that are playing great music. And many of them grow up to be, depending on their teacher, many of them are learning off the internet. And they learn technical proficiency. They can play note for note, what that clawhammer player played, but they don't have the soul that drives it, and I think they are lacking the lore. That's why. And so this grew out of a conversation we had. How can we get kids who are and older people who are learning so easy now the styles of ancient people on the internet, how can we get them to play with some soul? And I think the answer is they've got to get the lore. They got to know what these people face. I mean, you hear people in New York and California playing the music of Southwest Virginia. It just somehow doesn't sound right out of context. Sometimes it does. There are people who get it absolutely right. And I think the common denominator among those people is they have come here and studied the lore. So Uncle Malk says you can't have the folk without the lore.
Well, let's put our hands together and say thank you to Malcolm.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Did we have anybody listening on the web there?
Did we have some folks on YouTube? Yeah.
No, we had no questions from there tonight, though. Okay.
No.
Thank you all for coming out. Pick up a sticker and a business card. There's some Uncle Malk cards over there if you need to have my face in your wallet. Please do.
And before you go, let me just tell you about a few things coming up at the museum. Our next speaker sessions will be on Tuesday, April 14th, again at 7 p.m. That will again be in person. We're going to have Martin Fisher from the Center for Popular Music at MTSU here, recording live on a wax cylinder in the old archaic style with our very own Chris Trulson as the musician that he will be recording. So that is going to be very, very cool. So definitely plan to come for that. And then on the 21st and the 22nd of this month, a Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m., we will have Roxanne McDaniel here doing a 2-day cardboard dulcimer building workshop. We had this a couple of years ago. It was super popular. It's almost sold out, so if you would like to do it, I would really recommend getting signed up because that's a lot of fun, and she does a great job. And then on March 27th, we have one of our last hurrahs of our boot exhibit. If you haven't seen our cowboy boot exhibit, you have until April 6th to do so. But on March 27th, we are having our boot scootin' block party, which will be right behind the museum in the parking lot between us and Axe and Ale, where we will be having music, we will be having line dancing. You can go see the exhibit, and you can wear your boots and be in a boot competition with some good prizes. So do plan on coming and hanging out with us for the block party. And thank you again for being here, and we really appreciate it.
This is my book about Albert Cash. It's available here in the gift shop, or it's available on Amazon or anywhere. And my second book will be coming out this summer, and it's called It's Always Been About the Party, Old Time Music in the Blue Ridge. And there's about 40 essays on the music of the Blue Ridge and the characters I've met over the last 20 years of hanging out with crazy people who play music, and I think you'll enjoy it. Mac Trainum named it because that's his favorite saying. This music's always been about the party, Malcolm. Anyway, thank you all.